Welcome to another cloud coding video with me, MoSafe. In this tutorial, I will be going through the steps to configure a cloud-native development environment. This video is part of Intelligent Microservices on Kubernetes tutorial, where I demonstrate many cloud-native concepts like container orchestration, DevOps, AI, and event-driven development through a real-world scenario. To check out more details about this tutorial, visit my GitHub repo link in the description. Let's go! Let's start by setting up a vanilla Windows 10 machine with all the needed tools for this workshop development. Here I am in my Windows development machine desktop. The first thing we will do is to head up to the workshop GitHub repo, which is aka.ms/ie-on-containers. By scrolling down to the section labeled Workshop Agenda, I will select the Dev Environment Setup Guide. Azure Subscription. First is to make sure that you have access to Azure Subscription. You have few options. Whether your organization is providing you with an access to an enterprise subscription, or you have access to Visual Studio subscription benefits where a monthly Azure credit is provided to each subscriber license. If you don't have any of these, you can create a new Azure free account, which will come with several freebies, including $200 credit to get you started. Windows Subsystem for Linux is next. I will be using Windows 10 as my development machine, and because almost all of the scripts and tooling used throughout the workshop required Bash terminal, I need to have Windows Subsystem for Linux installed in Windows 10 PC. If you are using a Mac or a Linux-based operating system, you are already set. Installing WSL is really simple. All what you need to do is to go to Windows Features and make sure that you have Windows Subsystem for Linux capability enabled. Once installation is completed successfully, it will require restarting your machine. Now you are ready to get your favorite Linux distro from Microsoft Store. Here I'm searching for Ubuntu OS. I will be installing version 18.04. I will click Install to start. Give it a bit of time to finish downloading the operating system image. Once it is installed, you can click to launch. For the first time starting Ubuntu, it will take a few minutes to finish initialization. After that, as part of your first time initialization is setting up the administrator username and password. Now let's wait for it to finalize the installation. Now we are ready to enter our username. I will call it local admin. Now for the password, I will give it a strong password and retype it to confirm. Congratulations! Now you have a functioning Linux operating system running in Windows. Let's head back to our guide. Next is Azure CLI. Azure CLI is a command line interface to interact with Azure Subscription. We will be using it throughout the workshop to provision Azure resources. Although you can use Azure Portal to provision the resources, I prefer CLI as it provides a repeatable and source-controlled execution steps. I will be installing Azure CLI on Ubuntu. I will open the installation guide on Microsoft Docs and selecting my relevant operating system from the installation guide. In this case, it is Ubuntu. If you are using a Mac or other operating system, you go ahead and follow the steps for your relevant operating system. All what I need to do is copy this command. Click Start and search for Ubuntu, locate the app and launch it. Now pasting copied installation command to execute it. Entering the administrator password, giving it a few moments to finish the installation. Now with the CLI installed, you can check that everything is in a working condition by executing az-, version. Great! All set. Let's head back to our workshop. Next is Docker Desktop. Although this is not a required component to have, but it will be useful if you wish to run some of the platform components locally for development and debugging purposes. Let's head to Docker Desktop portal and download the version appropriate for our operating system. In this case, it is Windows. I will start executing the installer and accept the default configuration. After a successful installation, you will be asked to restart your machine. So I will just do that and head back to the workshop to continue the setup. Next is Cubectl, which is a command line interface for accessing Kubernetes APIs. To install it, you have multiple ways of doing this. I opted to use Azure CLI to assist with the installation of Cubectl. Let's open again the terminal window. I'm required to add sudo before the installation command because of my current bash setup, so it will have access to the directories in this machine. Now let's check the Cubectl installed successfully. Yeah. Now you can see the help command works as expected. Now let's head back and see what is next. Next is Visual Studio Code. I think most people know what is Visual Studio Code, which is a powerful open source code editor. Click Download and then install it. Now let's launch Visual Studio Code. Alright, let's head back to the guide and continue. Next step includes installing some Visual Studio Code extensions, switching to VS Code and selecting the Extensions tab. I will start with C# extension by Microsoft. Let's install it. Now searching for Kubernetes extension by Microsoft as well. Let's install it. Now Azure Function Tools extension. So here it is, installing it. Next, Azure IoT. You will notice here that I need to have the .NET Core installed in my machine, so you can actually click on the help link and had it installed. Simply, I will open the file and click install. All good. It is worth mentioning here the remote WSL extension is recommended because I already have Windows Subsystem for Linux installed. This extension gives you the ability to run all of your coding activities in the context of a remote WSL session. This is very useful. Now let's head back to our workshop and let's continue. I wanted to highlight that the primary microservices in this workshop are built on top of containerized version of Azure Functions, which run inside Kubernetes and automatically scaled via Kida, an open source project and stand for Kubernetes Event-Driven Autoscaler. What's next? Next is a tool called JQ. JQ is a JSON data management library that makes JSON manipulation very easy. I use it throughout the workshop in my bash scripts to manipulate, extract data out of JSON responses. It is a very handy tool to have. Let's copy the installation command and head back to the terminal. Paste it and have it installed. That's it for the dev tooling setup. Now let's head back to our workshop guide. Before I conclude the dev environment setup, I wanted to highlight 3 important points to consider when using Azure. First is Azure permissions. If you are using an Azure subscription that is controlled by central IT in your organization, this usually means that you will not be able to have permissions like creating service principals or creating other type of services. Key services like Azure Kubernetes service need to have a service principal account which is created in the Azure Active Directory. So please read these notes carefully, and I would recommend, if you are running under a restricted subscription access, to execute the entire prerequisite guide and escalate any permissions issues with your central IT team. Next point I want to highlight is Azure Subscription Resource Providers. Resource providers is basically extensions that allow installation of a specific type of resource in your subscription. For example, if you need to use Azure Cosmos DB in your subscription, you need to have Microsoft Document DB resource provider registered. Cosmos DB is one of the needed services in this workshop scope. I have prepared a script that will allow you to make sure that all of these providers are registered. If you're under restricted subscription access, please ask the administrator to run these commands to confirm all of them are registered. This has no cost implications whatsoever. Final point I want to mention before concluding this section of the workshop is Azure Subscription Resource Limits. Basically, each subscription has multiple limits or quotas across multiple types of services across regions. What we need to make sure is that you have enough virtual CPUs in your subscription and the target region to allow the deployment of the services before starting the workshop. What you need to validate is that subscription has enough virtual CPUs in the target region to allow the deployment of services. This command will show you how many utilize virtual CPUs, how many VMs you are using from a specific SKU, and what is the current limit that the subscription has. In this workshop, we are using the B series VM SKU, which is a very cost-efficient machines, and by default I will be using 3 VMs. Each has 2 virtual CPUs. Double check that your subscription has enough quota in the target region. If not, you can follow these steps to ask for increased limits in your subscription. Now your dev machine is ready to go. That's a wrap for now. Thank you for sticking around, and if you found this content useful, please consider giving it a thumbs up. I'll try to publish new content when I have story to tell, so you might consider subscribing and clicking the bell notification icon so you will not miss future videos. Cheers!